2019 town board meeting. In case of an emergency, I'd ask that you exit through the rear doors to the parking lot. We'll stand for 30 seconds of silent prayer, and I would ask Councilman Hart to lead us in the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, will you take the roll?
Supervisor Reagan.
Present.
Councilman Hart.
Present.
Councilman Hanley.
Present.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the October 21st, 2019 town board meeting.
Second.
Anything on the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Moving on to legal notices, proofs and publication of a posting of a legal notice of a public hearing to hear all persons interested in the creation of electric lighting district number 68, Royal Coach, Deer Chase Road in the town of West Seneca. I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
Anything on the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Anyone from the public that has any comments regarding this creation of this electric lighting district, feel free to come up to the podium.
Good evening, I'm Nancy Lynch, I live at 146 Royal Coach. And I'm just wondering why the residents were never notified that there was gonna be an increase in their taxes due to this street light issue. We were shown a petition, I think in July, and nowhere in the presentation was there any mention of any cost. So several of my neighbors who did sign the petition, I said to them, do you realize this is $250 a year? And they said, no, nobody ever showed us that, all they showed us was the signature papers. I think that this should be re-canvassed. There were 2 addresses on there with extra signatures. There was an address on there that's not in the zone that's mentioned in this legal notice. I don't understand why the streets are being lumped together if one street wants it and the other doesn't. I mean, if my taxes are going up, shouldn't you send me a letter and say, hey, there's something going on?
Well, this petition was brought on by a resident. I did ask the town attorney today, are the residents aware of the increase of costs and for the number of years that it be to take to pay off this, it's a couple $1 million to pay for this improvement in the infrastructure? Your neighborhoods were built by, the homeowners chose not to have lighting district. And that was part of what happened years ago. But this was brought as a request, and I'm going to say, Jean, was that, Tina, was the resident, do you know the residents?
Yeah, the resident's name was Ken Hansen, and just so you're aware, the petition was 2 pages. So the first page of the petition actually set out the anticipated cost, with the anticipated cost being about $142,000 to install and purchase the LED lighting, and how that would be paid at an approximate cost of $254 annually over a 15-year period, with another additional approximate cost of $15 annually to each house for operation and maintenance. So,
But that second page wasn't presented to the residents.
well, it's actually the first page of the petition, and
first page.
was it? I don't know.
I was one of the residents that he
I'm
came
sorry.
to.
May I finish?
Mhm.
So you were what? That was my question. You were one
Yeah.
of the residents he came
He
to.
showed me a clipboard with lines, where you could sign.
Okay. Have you reviewed the petition that was online with this agenda item?
I did,
Okay.
but just
And
this
so you
week,
saw that
because
page
someone
I'm
said
talking
that
about?
yes.
That first page? And you
Yes.
didn't see that when he came to your door?
No.
Okay. So I would recommend to the board that they table this so we can investigate that a little further. There was something else you said that I wanted to address, but I just
Just
lost my train
to
of thought.
point out, I believe Mr. Hanson is here. He might be able to tell us a little bit about the process he followed.
Yeah, I did.
Why don't you go up to the mic?
Thank you, Mrs. Lynch. Thank you, Chief.
I do actually remember going to her house and talking, and even before I even had a chance to even go through the whole spiel, she had already acknowledged that we are not interested, we didn't want this in the past, and we don't want it now. I did go with every person, I did talk to everybody. You know, I had a group of the kids with me and everything, we would, you know, letting people take a chance to read the petition, let them know exactly what's going on. Example for her though, I mean, she was flat out no, didn't even want to hear about it. She told me right off the bat. She was polite about it, she was nice. And, you know, we had a couple people that were like that did not want to see it. As I did go to every house though, I did give them the option to look at it over and explain to them what's going on. I showed them the pages here, you know, I said, take your time, take a look at it and see how you feel. But, I mean, there was a few people that, as soon as I explained it to them, they didn't want to know anything else about it. You know, so we moved on to the next house. It was, you know, we did everything that we were asked to do and we did it properly. So I stand behind that and I know I did it right.
Okay, so to address a couple of the other issues, why were both streets included? Well, that wasn't a choice just so you're aware by the town, that's a choice by the petitioner.
Actually, that was a choice by Ron and Bill. It would be better, it would be a better cost benefit to include both streets in it. They said it would make it cheaper to do it, so that's why we agreed to do that. We had also talked about if we only had half, you know, say if we had all the votes on Deer Chase, but nobody on Royal Chase wanted it, we would still stick to do Deer Chase and not Royal Coach. But it turned out, I see, I mean, almost everybody on there voted yes. It wasn't.
Well, also, I just wanted you to be aware that we did have the assessment office source out who were valid signatures and who were not. So those that didn't live in the district, or there were double signatures for a couple of houses. Off the top of my head, I wanna say there was 5 or 6 signatures that were crossed off, that were not valid signatures pursuant to the information that we had on file. And after that, what we look at, what the law requires us to look at is the total assessed values of the district. And so the total assessed values of the properties of the entire district are a little over 3.7 million. Of those that signed in favor of it, it was about 2.3 million, and those that did not sign, including probably your house, were about 1.3 million of the assessed value. So owners of at least half of the assessed values in that area were in favor of it.
Can I say something else? Mr. Hansen's right, he did, when he came to the door, I said, no, I'm sorry, we have talked about this before, and we don't care to have it because of the cost.
Could you go closer to the mic, because there's people in the back that probably can't hear you? Thank you.
His comment was correct. We did say we weren't interested. I didn't let him give me the whole spiel because we had been through this before in years past. However, my neighbors, who are newer to the neighborhood in the last few years, when I asked them, I said, you know, there's a town board meeting tonight about the lights. Did you realize how much it's gonna cost you? They said, we weren't told anything about a cost involved. And he may have offered them the papers. Maybe they just said, streetlights, that sounds like a good idea, I'll sign, and they didn't read the papers. I feel like it's such a small group of people that they should be afforded the opportunity to say, yes, I want this. Or even like a cheaper version of the streetlights, because the other half of Royal Coach has the wooden poles. Maybe that would be more cost effective.
So they are afforded the opportunity to speak forward today at the public hearing. I mean, that is the purpose of the public hearing. It was properly noticed as required by town law. The other thing that you may want to consider is that there is an this is what's called a subject to permissive referendum. So if the town board was to decide to vote it in, then should they receive a petition for a referendum within the time prescribed within law, then it would be looked at and put to a vote if the town decided to move forward with it at that point in time.
So that petition would have to be the entire 50 people again, or?
Well, I can't give you legal advice, but it is prescribed in town law, and you could look into that as an avenue depending on how far you want to take your voice.
Isn't it the 5% of, even in this type of election, I think it's still 5% of the last gubernatorial election. Those people sign it, that forces a permissive referendum. I mean,
I'm
it's-
not
it's
giving
something,
legal
yeah,
advice
I
to
don't think you
non-resident.
can talk about, that's what I think it is. But it might be a good idea for us to table this and look into that issue and,
I think the bigger issue here is the increase for those homeowners of $250. And if Mr. Hanson wanted to go back and to inform each and every one of them that this increase is $250 annually for 15 years, that would be an important factor.
I did explain that to all the people already. I mean, I didn't come out and say this is free. I said there is a cost to it. I mean, I did explain all this. It's not like,
Did you tell them it was about $250 a year?
yes, I told them the exact price of $142,000 is gonna run, and I also mentioned about the $15 maintenance fee a year that would be added on to our taxes. I mean, I did talk to people, some people weren't interested in it, said that we just want the lights. A lot of the people did wanna hear about it. For the signatures, we did have 2 signatures on there that were doubles, from a husband and wife. And then there was 3 other ones that were just people that just moved in on the street. And I did talk to Bill about that. One couple I couldn't take because they didn't speak English, so we didn't even include it. But we did have, people that are on that list that are brand new to the neighborhood, and Bill was informed of that as well.
Well, just for the purposes of the record, 18, 88, and 100 Deer Chase, as well as 115, 134, 135, and 176 Royal Coach were not in fact property owners, although they signed. And then the residents at 68 and 76 Deer Chase had signed twice each. So after those signatures were discounted, the assessed valuation was considered.
Even after those signatures were taken out, there was still a greater amount of people that wanted the lights, and there were greater assessed valuation of the houses. And the reason we did include both streets, because cost per unit was a lot cheaper than doing one street.
And what about doing a less expensive version like the poles so that the entire street matches?
I think the part of the cost that's the greatest is getting the electric back in there. We have to come from a different street back through one of the neighboring yards. It isn't, it's not that we're gonna come right off of Indian Church Road, it's getting the electric back into your neighborhood. That's the greatest cost. Plus, we're not gonna open cut driveways, they were going to, push the cables underneath the driveways.
I'm here tonight because the 8 neighbors that I spoke to were all like, what do you mean there's a cost? And he may have offered it, they may have not looked at it, they remembered signing, but again, they said they didn't realize it would be this expensive, especially right now on top of the fire hall that we got slapped with $300 more a year. And some of them are seniors. My neighbor's been there since the area was built, and she's like, well, this is gonna go to a vote, right? And I'm like, it doesn't sound like it. She was under the impression it would be on the ballot. And she said, I pre-voted the other day, and I didn't see that.
No, it's open for public hearing. This is the second public hearing. We had one at our last meeting. There were no speakers here for or against the project.
And I don't know, where am I supposed to see this public notice? Because, I don't go to the public building to look for a public notice. I feel like a small community like this, when the fire hall went up, we received notice upon notice. Here this comes by and we didn't receive any notice.
You live obviously in Fire District 2, the same one I live in, and you just indicated you received notice on notice. I live there, and I'm also on the town board, and I can tell you honestly, until the controversy really got fired up, I had received no information on that fire hall.
I don't know if
So I did not get the notice that you got apparently. Just to clear it up, and I want the public to know that fire districts are a separate government. This town board did not build that fire hall. That was built by the fire district, which is a separate independent government. They tax you for that fire hall. But the notice that you're talking about, I'm sure maybe it was published legally somewhere, but I never saw most of that, and I would have had something to say about it, which I did when it finally became public, and we had to go back time and again to vote on it, even though our residents residents of that fire district several times rejected it, so.
What I'll ask for is for the town board to table this agenda item for tonight, and let your residents, if they wanna come to our next town board meeting, voice, excuse me, voice their opinion for or against, and give us the reasons why, so we can hear whether they were told the cost, or, give us some more information, but, we have to believe everything that's given to us as fact. So when Mr. Hanson brought the signature into us, we know he canvassed the neighborhood, we had many meetings, myself and Mr. Hanson. So we take his word that everybody was brought up to speed, so.
And they may have just signed and not read what he had, I don't know.
Right, but Mr. Hanley is right, if they are not in favor of it, then they need to be here next time.
We'll table it
I
for
only heard
tonight.
about this on Friday, and that was word of mouth, or I wouldn't have known that this had gotten this far this quickly. Because usually things take quite a while. So if this thing did go forward, what time frame are we looking at that they'd be doing construction?
Well, first the engineer would come in and they would engineer the plan. First, we wanna make sure the residents are okay with the cost increase and the streetlights. Then the engineering department, right now it's on paper, next it gets into an actual drawing and a footprint. They would put the plan together, it would be early spring before we even did anything over there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to make a motion to table the creation of lighting district number 68, Royal Coach and Deer Chase Road.
Second.
Anything on the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Legal notice number 2, proof of publication, posting of a legal notice of a public hearing to hear all persons interested in the adoption of a local law number 5 for the year 2019, amendment to chapter 13, Code of Ethics in the town of West Seneca. Make a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
Anything on the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Terry, how are you tonight? Terry Funk, if you want to go ahead and give us your presentation.
I hope that everybody can see the presentation.
If you
If you
can't,
need to, just move up, the chairs unfortunately move pretty easily, so you can move up and get a better angle.
if you can't see the board, there's copies of this presentation over on the podium over there also. Okay, go ahead. So back on August 12th, we presented at a town board meeting changes that we wanted to make to the ethics code. We put those changes to the public and listened to their feedback. And what we decided to do was review our code, add in some of those public feedback comments, as well as we ended up inserting additional changes based on some experiences we've had as a board also recently. What I'm going to go through here is just the difference in the changes between our original presentation and what we've added since then. If you follow through the code under legislative intent, we added a statement to clarify that the ethics code is enforceable for all town officials, officers, employees, and volunteers. When we say volunteers, we're talking about unpaid people that are working on boards, committees, advisory committees, and such. We also added a statement that regardless of acknowledgement or acceptance of the code, it remains enforceable. So saying I don't know what the code is unacceptable, and you would still have to follow it. Under definitions and terms, we added some additional people to the relative. We added grandparent and grandchild, and under recused, we revised it to include not just abstaining, but also from being allowed to influence in any official action that's going on. We made a few changes here in the standards of conduct. One is the gift value. We changed from $75 to $25. That was just to coincide with state code. State code is $25, so we decreased it to match that. In section L, under the use of town property, we added that you cannot use town property for political means. So if you were having an event of some kind, you couldn't do it on town property. A political event, sorry. Under section M, You cannot require, authorize, or influence the participation or a contribution to a political campaign or committee. And then we added 2 sections. Section O is going to require the ethics board to go through 2 hours of training annually for all members. And section P is that ethics code will be presented annually to all town officials, board members, employees, and volunteers. So you'll get a copy of the code. What you do with it is up to them. Under penalties, we added 2 penalties to what we had there already. One is that we can recommend a civil fine not to exceed $10,000 for a violation upon a town official, board member, employee, or volunteer found guilty of a violation of the code. Such fine will be payable to the town. And the other thing we added is that we can assess a financial sanction up to $200 per day and/or suspend without pay an employee for non-compliance to unreasonable requests of the ethics board during an investigation. That would include, but not be limited to, failure to appear at a scheduled hearing, failure to produce documents or information, material and relevant to the investigation. Sanction would be payable to the town, and if a sanction is assessed, it shall be a final determination of the ethics board. We get to be the ones that assess this and put that in place if we so choose to. The party who suffers that sanction can challenge that in New York State Supreme Court. Oh, sorry. Under the whistleblower policy, we made a few changes here to just really to clarify the investigation process as part of our whistleblower policy. I just want to remind everyone that we do not pick to investigate things. Someone has to come to us with a complaint and file the complaint, and then we investigate it. We do not do any investigations without an official complaint being filed to us. And so we updated section C about how once a complaint's been submitted, we will investigate the allegations, conduct any investigations, we may administer oaths, we can issue subpoenas, and that's about it. The ethics board shall require clear and convincing evidence before determining that a violation has occurred. Under the composition of the ethics board, we removed that the ethics board serves at the pleasure of the town board, and we also added that an ethics board member can only be removed for cause. So our recommendations for today, we put a lot of time and effort into listening to everyone's feedback and trying to incorporate as much as we could into the changes. So today we're requesting that the town board approve the current version of the ethics code with the changes we put into it. And we feel that this updated code will absolutely improve our ability to act and do the investigations properly into complaints.
I do have a question. I don't see anything in here on financial disclosure by elected.
That's still in there. That's a piece that we added on 8/12, but we didn't change anything in it, so that continues to stay in there.
So these are only changes made since August 12th.
Yes, based on the feedback, yes. Okay.
Jerry, I have a question. Excuse me. The last sentence you just wrote that ethics board members can only be removed for cause.
Yes.
What about the terms, the terms that were staggered, that would be a removal? So
Yeah, so the terms apply, but during your term, if somebody new comes into the political arena and wants to fire the ethics board, they can't do that.
So
It has to be cause.
So the terms defined is still gonna stay in place?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. For the future, so we're asking the town board to approve the code as it is. That doesn't mean that we're done. We want to keep moving forward and keep investigating other things. So for the future, I just made some notes here. It was brought up in the feedback at the last meeting that the ethics board established themselves as an independent body instead of being an advisory committee to the town board. We did start to look into that. That is a lot of work and investigation and significant changes that we have to make to our board and how we work and run and who designates the members. So a couple examples of things that we would have to change if we went to an independent board would be that the town board no longer appoints members. We'd have an outside agency made up of business leaders, civic members, law, those types of groups that would, authorize who would be on the board. There's all kinds of questions around funding that we would have to address, enforcement of decisions, and so we would make decisions that would be final, so we have to get that built into the government code somehow. So there's a lot more research and things we have to do around that. So we are not saying we are not considering being an independent body. All we're saying is that we have a lot to look into to be able to do that. Right. And we are actually functioning as an independent body today. And if you look, we've added some things to our code that allow us to function independently. So it also would require a budget. So we're looking into potential things there. And I forgot what the last line was.
There we go. Continue to accept.
Oh, yeah, we'll obviously continue to accept public feedback and feedback from the town board members to present revisions as necessary.
Madam Supervisor, can I jump in here for a quick question on procedure?
Thank you, Chief.
Mostly for maybe Tina here. As the bargaining units have delineated in their contracts with the town, there are certain stipulations towards discipline laid out in each contract. Should the town board, through their department heads, mediate or impose discipline on employees through what's already in there, and this goes in front of the ethics committee, and they are an enforcement wing of the government as well, is that go towards a double jeopardy thing?
Yeah, well, it's problematic, and that's one of the things that I was gonna raise, and Mr. Hart and I were talking kind of quietly over here about some of the sections. I don't know if these are the exact ones you're referring to that were added, financial sanctions of up to $200 per day and or suspended without pay. I see us ending up in a grievance with white collar, blue collar over that.
Yeah, and as my experience, this may go all the way to perv and an improper practice on the part of the town. And again, I'm not for or against this independently, it's just that I have an obligation to conduct disciplinary hearings for employees, and I just am curious as if I was to give out a specific set of discipline as under the contracts, and that is done, and then it goes in front of the ethics committee, and they are now or the ethics board, and they are now a wing that can also impose additional penalties upon an employee if that would be a double jeopardy consideration. That's just, I'm curious about.
I know Supervisor Meehan, you were on the board when the ethics ordinance that we are amending in the next today or in the near future. And I believe, if I recall correctly, there was a great deal of resistance to the union, from the unions regarding ethics training and distribution and signing for signing off on the ethics that's required here. Maybe you could, I wasn't there, so I don't know the history of it.
Well, it was the first time the town had an ethics, yes, it was, and thank you for that. that we implemented any type of ethics, code of ethics for the town of West Seneca. And it involved a lot of many hours, and I can appreciate what you put together here and just the opportunity that you took to take a step back and listen and know that there's certain things, unfortunately, contractually, we have another obligation too, because it only will cause more of a burden on the town board if we start going down that road like the chief expressed. But we've been very fortunate. We have, any problems we've had with an employee that is disciplined, and then unfortunately sometimes we've had to terminate. But if it would be between that and then they were disciplined by us and then again disciplined by the ethics board, I know that would immediately come back to their union and there would be a backlash, if you will. But again, if an employee did something to the point where it's going to be brought in front of an ethics board, 9 out of 10 times that employee would already have been terminated. So you can look at it like that too, Chief. But I do agree with you, and that was the pushback before. Many of the unions would not sign off on it. I don't think any one of them did. They all believed that their contract was enough to provide them. We did give training to all the staff, but I don't know if we should table this and just go back to those 2 areas that are of concern to myself and obviously to the town attorney, the chief, and both board members.
I would request that so that I can consult with Labor Council about some of these things.
And I'd ask Mr. Manier.
Real quick, I'll just go up to the mic.
Could you? Thank you.
Let me address this. Alright, so the reason, and I'm John Lanier, I don't have a name tag or anything here, but just so everyone knows who I am, I'm the attorney for the Ethics Committee. And they've worked very hard on this code.
Can't hear you.
Sure, let me, is it on? Alright, how's this, better?
Yeah.
Alright.
Stay right up on it.
Alright, so they worked very hard on this code for many months, and they've done 2 investigations now based on complaints that were filed with them. And experience is very important when you're drafting a code. If you don't have experience in any type of an investigation, you really don't know what you're in for. And that's what this board kind of found out going through the investigations. They didn't have any teeth to enforce any of their reasonable requests on the people that they wanted to interview or investigate or compelled to produce certain types of documents that they needed, that they felt they needed to complete their investigations. So to be able to do that, we brainstormed, or the board brainstormed and thought about ways that they could have some teeth behind their requests. And one of the ways was to add a financial sanction or a potential suspension without pay until you comply. And I see what the chief is saying concerning a double jeopardy, but the ethics board was put in place to make this board and the town a more of a transparent type of government. The ethics board was put in place so that ethics would be brought to the forefront, as it was, many of the residents felt that it wasn't really being addressed. So going forward, no resident, I'm going to say this with confidence, the residents probably don't want an investigation to happen internally within its own organization. So for example, certainly the police have their own internal investigatory procedures that they must follow. But you don't get to see any of that. You don't get to be aware of any of that. And you don't know what exactly goes on. You just hear that something happened and somebody was disciplined, and that's all you see. So double jeopardy, I don't see it as double jeopardy. I see it as another complaint or just a complaint coming to the board, and the board looks to see if this complainant or the person who's the subject of the complaint has violated the code. They may have their own internal procedures or contractual obligations that they must abide by, but the code is something that's enforceable on all town employees. So because of that, it's enforceable on all town employees. And for the chief's example, it would still be enforceable upon police officers, and they have their own separate contractual obligations. I don't see it as a double jeopardy provision, and the board didn't see it as a double jeopardy provision as well. So hopefully that will answer the chief's question, but I do understand your concerns. And you do have your own obligations that you have to meet in terms of white collar, blue collar unions and things like that. We'll have to see where that goes. I mean, they certainly need teeth in their investigations, and one of the ways to get those teeth is through this.
And John, you're right, and I will offer you this, even though the employees didn't sign it when we first came up with the ethics code back in 2012, they still, because it's a town code, that still came into play. So but I still offer you this. I would like the opportunity just to take a step back, just for a minute. I know Carl wants to say something too, but if you would stay there, John.
Oh, sure.
Well, I just have a question.
Carl,
Okay.
would you go?
Yes, okay. I just have a question I'm gonna raise in this discussion. I mean, I could understand what the chief is saying about double jeopardy, but if I understand this correctly, when you conduct your procedure, the person is punished for an action that they committed at that time. When they're coming before the ethics board, we are just trying to get the facts in order to find out if the ethics code has been violated. If a person deliberately refuses to honor a legitimate request for information for us to make a decision on behalf of the public, isn't that a separate issue?
Yeah, but Carl, there's one thing that I thought I had too, along the lines of what you're saying, and what John's saying. We know we had that one controversy in the past year, and the ethics board couldn't really do much about it because the parties had attorneys. All right, and if I understand. Yes, no, wait, let me finish my thought. They're entitled, you know, like if they go and they come in and they have an attorney with them, they have, I believe they have constitutional rights, correct me if I'm wrong. But I think that's where we start.
When they pled the fifth.
Yes.
Oh,
So could you fine them for taking advantage of the constitutional rights?
No, but what if they don't appear in the first place? I think we had a problem with them not, refusing to even appear.
I don't.
Well, I think